Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn community conversation on active transportation in Fairfax County as part of the ActiveFairfax Transportation Plan project. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. We will maybe give it just a few more seconds to see if any other will join us, and then we get started. Thank you. All right, so let me introduce myself. I'm Nicole Winans, the project manager for the ActiveFairfax Transportation Plan. I'm an active transportation planner with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I'm joined here today by Lindsay Mofford, who is also an active transportation planner with FCDOT. And today's meeting will go over some of the background. What is active transportation? What are active transportation facilities? Before we start diving into, what is this plan about, and how do we plan for active transportation in the future? We will have multiple rounds of discussions and the chance to ask questions based on, the different type of modes. So we have the chance to discuss pedestrian issues, bicycle issues, and hiking and mountain biking and equestrian issues separately. Then we also have a chance to talk about the vision, your vision for active transportation in Fairfax County, as well as an open discussion at the end of the meeting to cover any other questions you may have or any other comments. All right, let's start with the meeting logistics. This is a virtual meeting due to the pandemic. This is not what we envisioned when we started this project. We were hoping to be able to, have these discussions face to face, but hopefully this format will work. Please feel free to speak up. We really try to make this conversational. It's just two of you, I know both of you. But so feel free to share your thoughts. If you would like to speak because you're muted, please raise your hand, and you can do so by clicking the raise hand symbol in the lower right hand corner. It's like a little hand, and then we can unmute you. If you prefer to ask a question, you can also type it into the chat during the presentation if you don't want to forget your question. And when we open it up for discussion, you can use the chat as well, so you can see each other's messages if you would like to answer the question. If I don't think anyone is calling in, but if someone is on the phone, they can press *3 to raise a hand, and we can unmute them. So what is active transportation? The definition that we're using for our project is that active transportation includes all forms of non-motorized, self-propelled travel for recreational or transportation purposes. And that can include walking, riding a bike, riding a horse, hiking, running, or rolling, for example, in a wheelchair, on a scooter, or in a stroller. Our definition does have a notable exception to the non-motorized self-propelled rule. So it includes electric micromobility vehicles, which also use active transportation facilities such as bike lanes. So what are active transportation facilities? And we tackle this by looking at pedestrian facilities separately, then bicycle facilities, and hiking, mountain biking, and equestrian facilities. And those are the type of facilities we can plan for as part of this project. So we want to just go over them quickly so we have a shared understanding of the opportunities. So pedestrian facilities, the most basic one is a sidewalk. And they come in different sizes. So in urban areas, the sidewalks are wider. They're usually concrete or with pavers, and they're very inviting. Often there are street trees and street lighting and benches to invite social gatherings and strolling and lingering. Suburban sidewalks are a little more narrow and more basic functional. They really take you from A to B, but there is no place to stop necessarily. But it helps provide connectivity and access to bus stops, for example, and to other neighborhoods. The 5-foot width that most of our suburban sidewalks have are based on the need of wheelchair users to travel and pass each other as well as turn around. And we have different type of crosswalks in the county. The graphic here on the left shows the different striping options that we have for crosswalks. Number 1 here is the most common, which are the 2 parallel lines that's often located at signalized intersections. Then number 2 is a boulder crosswalk, so it's more visible and it's called a high visibility crosswalk. And it is often found near schools or near metro stations or other high pedestrian areas. Number 3 here is a crosswalk as well. It doesn't look like one, and many people don't know that necessarily this is legally a crosswalk, but it is. So every leg of the intersection is legally a crosswalk, even if it's not a marked crosswalk. And we also have crosswalks mid-block. So the mid-block crosswalks are usually striped with the high visibility crosswalk to draw the attention of the drivers to pedestrians that are crossing here. Those are common if there's a bus stop or a trail that's crossing. And you'll also find the pedestrian warning signage there. Then there are enhanced crosswalks. So the one on the left here includes a pedestrian refuge island that allows people that want to cross the street to cross one travel direction at a time. And they have a safe place to wait. So that can make travel across this road safer and more efficient. On the right here is a new tool in our toolbox. It's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or short RFB. It has a push button that pedestrians can press, and then flashing lights that are hard to see in the picture, but they're very bright, particularly at night when sometimes it's hard to see pedestrians in the street. It is not a signal, however, so pedestrians shouldn't expect that the cars will stop for them. Pedestrians still have to wait at the side of the road until it's safe to cross the street, a safe gap in traffic. The signalized crosswalk provides that protection for pedestrians, and cars have to stop. So they get their own signal. Of course, these are all over the county. And the only conflict a pedestrian should expect here is a right-turning vehicle, which is supposed to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. On the right, this is a new tool in our toolbox as well. And this is a pedestrian signal that can be found at the mid-block crosswalk. So those are not supposed to be installed at intersections, but on very busy roads, particularly if they have more than 2 lanes, these are a great tool to stop traffic and provide that protected crossing phase for pedestrians on demand. And there's also a great separated crossings. On the left here is a pedestrian bridge, on the right is a pedestrian tunnel. And those are most wisely used crossing a highway or a very busy road, as well as a body of water like a river or train tracks. On the right, this is a trail crossing in Reston. The road is not that busy. And often pedestrians do prefer to cross at grade on street level. But Reston was actually built with many of these tunnels, and they seem to be working well. But we are considering carefully where to place these 2 options. So now we would like to hear your thoughts on your experience walking, running, or strolling in Fairfax County. And please raise your hand if you would like to speak, or you can place your answer or question in the chat. And I see we do have a call-in user. So if you would like to speak, please press *3, and that will raise your hand. We'll give it a minute to see if, oh, there we have a raised hand.
We do have a raised hand. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, Sonia Brehe here. I just, I guess my 2 cents, I'm pretty well engaged in all aspects of sort of advocating for better, safer walking, biking, rolling, all of these things, as you know, Nicole. I think the walking experience here, I'm so glad to see that you guys are working on this, developing this plan. I think obviously better connected pathways, walkways, sidewalk connections. I think pretty critical continues to be our ability to cross roads. I'm glad to see the rapid beacon flashing devices are being installed, but I've yet to see them in my part of the county, and look forward to seeing them sort of implemented in many, many, many more locations throughout the county. I know the county is large. I was just looking, I was down at Falls Church High School, and the crosswalk that the students use there is on a bend in the road, and cars never stop. So, looking at areas near schools, near athletic fields and parks where there is just a lot of conflict. I know we struggle with the main roads, these arterials like Route 50 that I live near. We have crosswalks across there that are unsignalized. And while the speed limits I wish were slower, it's 45. People clearly go 55 and above. It's a pretty well-used transit corridor, as many of our arterials are. So I think slowing speeds and figuring out how to provide more complete street infrastructure to make it safer and more comfortable for people on foot or on bike, or crossing with strollers or accessing transit, however we're moving around, we all need to be accounted for in the designs of these roads. So complete streets and more signalized crossings, please, would be my feedback.
Thank you, Sonia. And you can press the hand button again to take down your hand, unless you would like to speak again. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Yes, we have one more. Hold on. Let me unmute you.
Hi, this is Renee Dances from the Tysons Partnership. I'm very excited to see Fairfax looking at making it possible for people to walk, bike, roll, and stroll better in the county. As you know, the amazing thing about Tysons is Fairfax is engaged in an extraordinary experiment of retrofitting a car-based area to a walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented destination. And I know that, frequently we look at these issues naturally in terms of climate meeting our climate goals, meeting the health goals that come from walking and biking, meeting equity. I think it's also worth remembering that there are economic goals involved here as well. There's a very direct correlation between an area's walkability score and the real estate values in that area. I think it's something, and I'm trying to remember if it's like literally like every time your walk score goes up by 5 or 10 points, the square foot dollar value increases just as much, if not more. It's quite a direct correlation. And when I talk to Tysons landowners and developers, other stakeholders, whether it's employers, people who are looking to attract and retain talent, they're always aware that walkability and bikeability are an attraction. This is something that the highly trained professionals that they want to attract to Fairfax are looking for and that they want to provide. And obviously, obviously the basics of walking, biking, strolling, rolling, and whatever method you get around, whether it's in a car or otherwise, you know, those are the basics of our lives, and we all ought to be able to do them safely and pleasantly and conveniently. But I think it's just worth remembering that in addition to the equity and climate implications, there are also serious economic implications and a great deal of benefits that can be provided from improving the experience of people who are walking, biking, running, and rolling in Fairfax County. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments?
I don't see anything in the chat. Wait, hold on. Renate has her hand up again. Did you have?
My mistake. I was trying to take my hand down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Carry on. All right. Well, then I don't think we have any more questions.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is bicycle facilities. So we have many different types of bicycle facilities in the county and can plan for additional ones that are new to our toolbox in bicycle transportation planning. So we have on-street facilities and off-street facilities. So let's look at the on-street facilities first. So here we see a shared streets. The one on the left is a very comfortable shared street that doesn't need any other treatments except maybe some wayfinding signage. It's a quiet neighborhood street, very low traffic, low speeds, and most notably, there's no markings on the street, which really helps slow down traffic and moves cars to the center of the road quite naturally, providing space for walking and biking along the side of the street. So once you add a double yellow, as you can see on the right here, it's still the same speed limit, but probably higher volumes. It pushes the cars to the side of the street and really forces cyclists and drivers to share the same lane. And in those circumstances, we can either use signage that says bikes may use full lane, or we can use a street marking that you can see here, which is called a sharer or shared lane marking. And we very sparingly use them because they wear off pretty quickly and sometimes they are confusing to drivers. But what they're supposed to do is, first of all, alert drivers to expect cyclists in the road, but also to alert cyclists to position themselves away from the side of the street and further to the middle of the lane, where it's safer for them because this road is not wide enough to share the lane by passing and having the 3 feet of distance that's required by law. So in this case, a driver would need to pass crossing the double yellow line when it's safe to do so. And that's also what the law suggests. A slightly more comfortable facility than the sharers are a designated bike lane, so that we can provide those where there is enough space for cars and bikes to have their own lane. So ideally, there are bike lanes in both directions. Sometimes the road is narrow and we can only provide a lane in one direction when we retrofit during repaving, where we can restripe the road. When we build a new bike lane with capital project money where we need to widen the road for the bike lane, we would, of course, provide bike lanes in both directions. But it's just a marking on the street. So even though drivers are not supposed to drive or park in bike lanes, sometimes it does happen. So the comfort level of these really depends on the type of road and the type of cyclist and the comfort level in being so close to traffic that could merge into the bike lane. A more comfortable facility is a buffered bike lane that provides a double white line, and the space in between can be between 2 feet and 8 feet. At least 3 feet, we can start hashing out the space in between, and that provides that extra room between the cyclist and the driver. And if an inattentive driver starts to merge a little bit in a curve into the bike lane, there's a safe buffer in between. So it does provide that extra comfort. Oh, it's still, a line on the map, on the street. So it's not a completely separated facility. And now we can look at the separated options that we have that truly keep cars out of the bike space. So the most common one in Fairfax County is a shared use path. And those are usually paved trails that are along parallel to a road, but they can also go through parks. And those are very popular and often highly used. Like the WD is a good example, as well as the Mount Vernon Trail, but there are also many other trails over 500 miles in Fairfax County that are open to cyclists. Some of the intersection treatments are often not as comfortable, depending on, this one is a ramp, so that it would need some specific safety treatment, but often these crossings are signalized, just like a crosswalk, and provide that protected crossing. A new option that we don't have in Fairfax County yet, but we just added it to the comprehensive plan in McLean, is an urban shared use path. Those are usually not paved, but they can have pavers or they can be out of concrete, but they are actually designed for bike use. This one is the trail in Indianapolis. In a new facility that we are currently having multiple of these in design, but they're not implemented yet through capital projects. There's sections of it that are implemented by development, but they don't have the striping yet. So right now they just look like bare pavement. But we do have them occasionally. Those are separated bikeways, also known as cycle tracks, that can be one-way or two-way. The two-way can be on one side of the road or on both sides of the road. Like in Richmond Highway, for example, we are planning for, because the road is so wide, to have two-way facilities on both sides. But on a more narrow road, just like a bike lane, it would be in the direction of travel, and it looks like a bike lane, but is behind the curb, so it's fully protected from cars. And how it's different from a shared use path is that it has a separated facility just for pedestrians. So there shouldn't be any conflicts for cyclists, and higher speeds can often be achieved. And these are most appropriate in denser areas, more urban areas, so they don't need to be everywhere. Parts of the county are pretty suburban or even rural, where very few pedestrians are expected to be on shared use paths. So they're mostly a bike facility, but if a lot of pedestrians are expected to use this facility, it's better to have that separation if space is available. So how do we decide which bike facility to choose from? So for the sidewalks, it's a little bit easier. You either have, the narrow or like it's just a standard sidewalk, or a wider facility in a more urban area. But we have so many different bicycle facilities. So this graphic kind of illustrates how these different facilities, appeal to potential cyclists. So a shared roadway, particularly a busier one, or a bike lane along a busier road, probably only appeals to more experienced cyclists that don't mind being so close to traffic. So they're like, yeah, this is not bad, I can deal with this. But others that don't feel comfortable using that facility would rather ride on the sidewalk or not at all. So if you provide a wider, more comfortable, protected facility that can actually be used by all ages and abilities, and you can see the two kids here as well, it still serves that original cyclist that was okay riding in the bike lane or the shared facility with vehicles. But now we can really accommodate so many more users. And this graph kind of breaks it down into, what parts, how many, folks in our population would use a different type of facilities. So the more experienced cyclists make up, less than 7% or less of the population. Those are the ones we often see out there on streets that don't have any facilities. And they appreciate, our bike lanes that we're striping. Don't like to ride in bike lanes next to parked cars. We hear a lot of that. But there are, there are a small part of the population that is our most enthusiastic bike users. Then we have the somewhat confident cyclists that, are comfortable in bike lanes, particularly if they are on lower speed roads with lower traffic. They commute to work or to the park or to school. but it's still a pretty small part of the population. And then we look at the big chunk of the population. Over half we know would not share the road with vehicles or be on a bike lane unless it's a very, very safe street with very low traffic volumes and actual low traffic speeds. So this group prefers the off-street facility, the full protection from cars, and it's often beginner cyclists or families riding with children or elderly, where they don't have such a high stress tolerance for being in traffic. So when we look at what type of facility to choose, we need to look at the kind of road that facility is next to, what kind of users we would expect, the land use that's next to it, is it urban, is it suburban, is it rural, and then make a decision based on what really serves the most amount of users. So now we would like to hear your thoughts on your experience riding a bike or a scooter or another small micromobility vehicle in Fairfax County. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. And if you're calling in, please press *3 to raise your hand. You can also use the chat.
All right, Ronit, I'm not sure if your hand is still up from before.
It's let me try and take it down.
All right, it's down now.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll leave it there for the minute. All right, we're gonna switch to Sonia, and just to let you know, Nicole, my computer just gave me a notification that it's trying to restart. I will try to battle that. In the meantime, Sonia.
Great.
Unmute.
Okay. Thank you. So yes, on bicycling, I have a few notes here that I was thinking of. So first off, on the shared streets concept, I continue to think that this is a great idea for our frontage roads, particularly along these arterials like Route 50 that I was speaking about. If it's coupled with some traffic calming. If we could take these frontage roads and prioritize them for biking and slow speeds and to, physically deter cars from zooming down them, it would really provide a great opportunity for connectivity. And in a situation like Arlington Boulevard, where we're trying to build out the Arlington Boulevard Trail, where we're not currently, building a shared use path, figuring out how to better utilize the frontage roads to complement the new walkways that were placed there would be really, really great. And I could see that as a great advantage for folks who are less confident riders. And in my particular case, this is the way the kids ride to high school. They go down that frontage road. So figuring out that, I think, would be really helpful. I'm certainly excited to see more of these separated bikeways, like we're seeing on Route 1, and that you're speaking about incorporating into McLean and elsewhere. I think that'll be a really huge benefit to really just separate bicyclists from traffic altogether. The other suggestion I would really like to see in the county is that when we have bike infrastructure, bike lanes, whether it's a protected bikeway or just a bike lane on road, continuing that facility through the intersections is really important. Right now, you sort of just get dumped at these really oversized intersections. And it's at that point, it's only for the confident cyclist to get through it. It doesn't work for me. I'm not comfortable. I'm going to jump on a sidewalk. And even better if we could find out where we can implement these new protected intersections, where we can fully separate users so that it's safer and more comfortable for all types of riders. And back onto the speeding and concerns, I also wanted to point out that we do have new laws that allow for us to use automated speed enforcements, ASE near schools. So in areas like I was speaking about where the high school is, if we could start implementing ASE to try to lower those speed limits, not speed limits, but the high-end speeding and collect the data we need. That would be super helpful. Also, the law is that we're supposed to stop for pedestrians at crosswalks. It would be helpful to have some education or signage at crosswalks where that's appropriate to educate drivers that they need to stop. We also have the ability, probably not until July, to lower the speed limit down to 15 miles an hour in certain areas. And I hope that the county really sincerely looks at where I think this will be great in residential areas where we can really get the speed limits down. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing so many great ideas, Sonia. I just want to touch on some of those points. So the shared streets, and I didn't mention that in the slides, if we enhance them with traffic calming, and particularly also with branding it as a bikeway, it would be called a bicycle boulevard, which is not a type of facility we have currently in our bike plan, but one we will certainly want to include in this updated active transportation plan. So it would actually be a perfect fit for some of these service roads, but as well as cut-through streets, particularly ones that already have traffic calming, because the reason it's a cut-through street is because it's a convenient way of getting places, and it's not really supposed to be for cars, but bikes would that's a great route for bikes to take to get to the destination quickly, and it already has a traffic calming, so it would just need that added bicycle enhancement. Then on the protected intersections that you mentioned, these are usually done in connection with the protected bike lanes, and all the projects where we're currently working on these protected bike lanes will have the protected intersections as well. So we will get probably about, give or take, 15 in the Reston and Herndon area within the next 3 years as part of the cycle track projects there. Richmond Highway, that has the proposed cycle tracks, is a little bit more complicated because the intersection is so large. It will still be protected, but because of the BRT in the middle, it's not the classic version of the protected intersection, but it's basically the bikes will cross with a pedestrian signal. And yeah, thank you for bringing up the automated speed enforcement. And that's definitely something to consider, particularly in school zones and the lower speeds in neighborhoods. So being from Europe myself, all our neighborhoods have the 18 miles per hour speed limit, and it does make a big difference. I always feel 25 miles per hour in the neighborhoods here it still feels fast in comparison to the speed of a pedestrian or a cyclist. So thank you for bringing that one up. Let's see if we have one more question. Yeah, I'm not sure if Lindsay is still there. She has to restart her computer, but hopefully I can unmute. Second. Are you still there, Lindsay? She left us. Sorry about that. Lindsay is a host, so I don't have the same rights that she has to unmute, apparently. So I'm sorry about that. Let's move on, and please hold your question, Tom. So I would definitely love to hear your thoughts. Oh, I actually just became host because Lindsay was kicked off, so now I should be able to unmute you. Unmute. There we go.
Great, thanks. Thank you. So in my area, we have a couple of the big arterial roads that go through our neighborhoods, right? And there's lots of speeding traffic. And so one of the ways we get around that is using, secondary roads that run parallel to the artery. I mean, it doesn't really matter what kind of sidewalk or shared use path it has along the artery. If there's a lot of turning traffic and such, right, it's kind of hazardous. So one of the mechanisms that we have to help with those alternate routes is connecting cul-de-sacs, because I'm in the western part of the county that has a lot of cul-de-sac development, single family home development. So having those connectors that go between two cul-de-sacs is helpful because that kind of makes it into a bicycle boulevard. It makes it into an area where we can use it for transportation to get from A to B by cutting through the cul-de-sacs across the connector path or shared use path. And I recently, and I wish that our Vdot person was there, but I recently opened a ticket with Vdot about parking, people parking across and blocking these shared use paths. And the feedback I got from the engineer was something along the lines of, well, that's just the use case of a cyclist didn't even cross the engineer's mind. It was more about, oh well, it's it's unusual that we'd have a ramp leading right out to the street, and that's dangerous for wheelchair users, and we wouldn't really have no parking there because basically it was something about we want to protect people from running out into the street or something from the ramp, which is silly. And basically it was looking the use case of cycling through these things wasn't really something I thought about. So I appreciate the efforts in the county to make those connections, and I think that's something that's important as well. It's really about like planning a route between A and B and using that as part of the planning process, right? Which is like we like to connect Reston Town Center to this development over here. What are the mechanisms? What are the ways they have to get there, and what are the missing connections?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That's a really good point you bring up there, and that's something that could potentially be addressed through a policy statement in the plan that would specifically need to say, if a shared use path intersects with a road, it needs to connect to the actual road surface, not just the sidewalk. So generally, if there is a ramp on the other side of the road, they can put a ramp in because it would be a full crosswalk. But usually engineers, if there's, won't put a crosswalk ramp in that would lead down to the street if there is no crosswalk ramp on the other side. So particularly at the end of a cul-de-sac, where sometimes basically the ramp would lead into the middle of the big, round space, the treatment that Vdot has agreed to and is often used in those places, but would need to be pointed out. And through a policy, that's a good way of handling that, would be called a maintenance access. And it's not a standard curb ramp like you would see for a crosswalk, but it's actually a driveway entrance. So it doesn't have the ADA design. So that's kind of like a workaround we're using, and we're currently working with Vdot on the 66 trail connections that sometimes don't have that ramp for cyclists to transition from the road to the shared use path. And yeah, the parking is an added hurdle on top of that. So having a car parked right there is not helpful, but not having a curb ramp there also is an issue. So thank you for bringing it up so we can think about how best to address that in a policy statement.
Thanks.
Sonny, you still have your hand up, or would you like to say?
I just wanted to add.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So similarly to that, to Tom's point, in our neighborhood, we have a neighborhood walkway. It's just a trail that cuts through sort of the middle of the homes, and same issue is where that particular trail ends. There is no curb cut to the road, so people pushing strollers or on a bike with your kids, you have to zig and zag and use somebody's driveway that's like 15 feet down from where the trail actually ends. And we've asked about it, and it was that that was the end of the trail, so it didn't deserve a curb cut because they didn't want people going into the roads, or that there wasn't a pedestrian infrastructure on the other side of the road. And similarly, there's a stream. We have a small stream buffer park that people will often walk along. It's sort of a walking circuit in our neighborhood. And in the middle of it, it crosses a street. And because there are no sidewalks, it's a park. We've asked for a crosswalk where it crosses that main street in the middle. And because there's no sidewalks, we weren't allowed to have a crosswalk. without actually going in and installing a sidewalk so that it would inherently be connecting some pedestrian facilities. And I don't know exactly what the rules are there. In some places I see crosswalks where it is not an adjoining pedestrian sidewalk. But it seems kind of wasteful to add a whole sidewalk along a stream where people walk just to get a crosswalk and some visibility to cross the street. So whatever's missing there, I think that's just another area like that I notice within our neighborhood for where people walk and bike with kids, and just trying to raise the visibility that pedestrians are crossing there without necessarily having to rebuild and add all of this infrastructure that isn't really needed, but we just want an improved crossing or access like through a curb cut off of a trail to the roadway. That's just sort of my added 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, so on the crosswalk issue, we do need ramps on both sides or even an ADA treatment. So we don't necessarily need a full sidewalk. So if there is a need for a crosswalk, but not necessarily, there's nothing on the other side, sometimes we can just add that curb ramp and that's it. So it would ramp up people to, a grassy area or a gravel area, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a full-fledged facility, which I agree with. Sometimes, is not necessarily needed. I mean, obviously we would want pedestrian facilities on both sides of the road, but it really depends on the context. But if the crossing is really the essential part, and that's a much lower cost to just add the curb ramp. However, I have to say we do currently have to meet warrants for crosswalks, so we need to have at least a certain amount of people crossing within an hour. And Lindsay can probably say something about it since she's doing a lot of our crosswalk studies. But it sounds like if there is a park or some big attractor that those crosswalks are probably warranted. But I'll let Lindsay speak to that if you would like, Lindsay.
Yeah, so for each crosswalk, we have to do a little engineering study that looks at not only the demand. So Vdot requires that we show there is pedestrian demand as evidenced by people currently using the crosswalk. But we also have to look at, the the volume and the speed, or the speed limit specifically on the roadway and the configuration of it. How far is the crossing distance and that sort of thing. Is there adequate sight distance? So there's a recognition that even when there is demand, it might not necessarily be a safe place for a crossing. So the engineering studies look at all of that, and then we submit to Vdot for their evaluation. And it seems like we do need to have at least a ramp on each side in order to get crosswalks approved. I don't know that there's a consistent answer on whether you need a full sidewalk at this point. But that does, unfortunately, it does take a little more time because we have to do the engineering studies and actually send somebody out there to count the demand. So there's a bit more of a process there than just looking at the plans.
And those are mostly for the unsignalized crosswalk. So at signals, we don't need to do that study. And we do have an internal policy where we ask for, the 4 legs all striped with crosswalks from Vdot. That hasn't been done in the past. So that's more of a newer, way of approaching pedestrian accommodation. But that's also an approach that we would like to formalize as part of this process, that actually have a policy that we can point to that says in Fairfax County, all legs of a signalized intersection should have a crosswalk. So that's, so I think I don't think we need a sidewalk attached to it. For example, the new signal that's going in on Pinecrest and Reston will not have facilities on one corner that we could connect to. However, we are getting the curb ramps on all 4 corners, and it makes sense, for example, for a pedestrian or cyclist that would like to make the turn. they're walking up to the intersection, they can cross on the same side, even though there is no real facility on the other side, and then cross again. And then having those two curb ramps connected provides like that path. And then in the future, we will add that missing sidewalk through a separate project. So that's how it's often done. The signal projects are often standalone, and they won't include like the sidewalk. Tom, do you still have your hand up from earlier, or do you have another comment?
No, sorry. I'll lower it.
All right, let's move on then to
Nicole. I'm getting back into the swing of it here.
No worries. I'm glad that you got back on so quickly. All right, so let's look at hiking, mountain biking, equestrian facilities really quick. So those are usually natural surface and often much more narrow than a shared use path. So you can see some examples here in the pictures. We have very, very popular hiking trails in Fairfax County and a pretty large constituency of hikers. Sometimes there's the conflict between the people that would like the paved trail and the people that like the natural surface trail, and both have good reasons why they want that type of trail. But the benefit of these hiking trails, of course, a very different kind of experience connecting with nature. And having looked at the survey results we've received so far as part of this public outreach, one of the top answers of why people are using active transportation is to connect with nature, or to connect to a trail. So there's definitely a lot of interest. We're seeing a lot of natural surface trails added to our planning map. And these are also much cheaper to build. So there could potentially be an interim facility if you don't have the funding for a paved trail to have a natural surface trail, or have both, like serve both users, have parallel trails, just like the WD has, the paved surface and also an unpaved surface for equestrians and joggers to use. So mountain biking facilities also sometimes come with hurdles or obstacles for the more experienced riders that would like to test out some of their skills. So we have some really great mountain biking parks in Fairfax County, which are real assets. And of course, we want to not just design for these type of uses, but also connect them to our larger trail system so that you can actually bike or walk to the trail and not just drive to the trail. So let's open it up for discussion if anyone would like to share their thoughts on hiking, mountain biking, or equestrian uses in Fairfax. If not, that's fine. But we have a constituency, and often people would like to discuss hiking issues separately. All right, we have a raised hand.
Sonia.
Yeah, I won't take too long. I just do want to add at least that I do like the natural surface trails. I think it's a really awesome opportunity, especially in our urban suburban area, to have access to the outdoors, to walk, bike. If folks ride horses, I think it's great to connect with nature, get exercise, and in some instances, it can connect neighborhoods through these trails. So I'm all for them. And I think when we, I'm thinking about like the Audrey Moore Rec Center and the Cross County Trail, and then the mountain biking trails in that area. I know there's always these challenges between, do we pave it? Do we leave it natural surface? I do like the idea of trying to figure out how to, with the Cross County being like the main line that's paved so that it provides access to different abilities, but then also providing the opportunity for off-road mountain bikers to have some natural surface, either running parallel or off of that main line trail. So I like it, I support it, and I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Sonia. Do you have any other comments on hiking mountain biking trails?
Nothing in the chat, and you didn't have any hand raised.
Thank you. let's move on to complete streets. So complete streets are, of course, multimodal. So having the walking, biking, and also the car infrastructure, but it's more than that. So a true complete street, also called a livable street, or I think in Fairfax County we have some very interesting names for those, like livability spine. They're supposed to be, public space, like a corridor to enjoy walking, biking, or even driving along. So that can be achieved with enhanced infrastructure and streetscaping, such as street trees, street lighting, pedestrian scale lighting, and street furniture, sometimes public art or places to rest, mini parks. So there are many options of creating, this environment that's really enjoyable and not just pure functionality and safety. So the picture on the right shows like what a complete streets enhancement would look like on a real world example. So you can see it's the same road. There's this yellow truck in both pictures, but it's a very different experience, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists going down this corridor. So now let's look at how we are planning for active transportation in the future. So we do have currently some plans that look at active transportation facilities. And the current plans we have are the Countywide Trails Plan, which has been around since the 1970s. It plans a very comprehensive off-street network of both paved trails as well as unpaved trails. It categorizes some trails as regional and has like minor trails on it. So it's a really forward-looking and looking through the policy documents that were developed at the time. The goal of this plan was really to create an alternative for driving to get around. So it had a strong transportation component. It was supposed to be a bicycle network, but also connect to recreation, recreational opportunities, allow people to go to parks and other recreational facilities. Then we have the Bicycle Master Plan, which is more recent. It was developed or approved in 2014. It focused more on street facilities, so mostly bike lanes, as well as shoulders and shared streets, and just help try to connect those low traffic, low stress roads with little trail connections. So it did a really good job of forming this wide network of bike facilities that would really support mostly commuting. So it did have a heavy commuter focus. It did include a couple trails which were pulled from the trails plan and just highlighted in the bike plan as having significant transportation function in the network. Then we also have special area plans, and those are not as widely known, but they do include active transportation facility recommendations. So the special area plans are the activity centers. So example, Reston, Tysons, Annandale, Springfield, those kind of commercial centers. Fairfax County has more than 20 of them, and they all come with these cross sections. So unlike the trails plan and the bike plan, which are more of a network map, the special area plans map out the street network, but then look at the active transportation facilities in this cross section format. Often it does also add this complete street element inside those areas, which is great, a great start. As part of this plan, we are looking at all these different plans and merging them together, because sometimes we have multiple different recommendations across these plans for the same location, which can be a little bit confusing for developers to see what they're supposed to do, and even for capital projects to determine what the right facility is. And then the activity center areas are actually the highest plan. They trump the other plans, but then the trails plan is also in the zoning code, so it gets really complicated. So this project will merge these together and make sure that the active transportation network plan, as well as the area plans are, speaking to each other and showing the same facility for the plan. We also have a regional trail network plan, which is not a comprehensive plan, and it's not specific to Fairfax County. It's a regional approach led by the Capital Trails Coalition. Fairfax County is not an official member, but we have been working with them. Part of our network is designated as part of this Capital Trails network, as the network is branded as. And you can see on the map here, the green trails are the trails that already are built in different in different condition, because some of these trails are older. But there's something there that is bikeable, probably needs enhancement here and there. But that was what the Capital Trails Coalition accepted into their system. And in orange are trails that are planned, mostly funded. Many of these are either under construction or will be constructed soon, but it also includes at least one, what we call a visionary trail that is not funded, primarily this east-west connector trail down here, if you can see my cursor, as a major connection that we're hoping to do at some point in the future. And part of this plan, we would look at enhancing this network for Fairfax County. As you can see, there are gaps. There are clearly some areas that are not well connected, especially up in the Drainsville, McLean area. You see very few connections there, but also other gaps in other areas that we want to fill in as part of this plan. The reason why the network was chosen is when when this effort first started, we were asked to only include trails that were already funded or existing and connected to the network, so that it excluded planned trails for the most part that weren't funded yet, with that one exception. So now here we have a chance to formalize what our regional network looks like and make sure that it connects to our surrounding jurisdictions. So more on the need for this plan update. I mentioned the inconsistencies between the plans that we have, but also the need to update the facility design recommendation. So some of our bike lanes and some of the trails don't really meet best practices anymore. They're either too narrow or not the right facility. So we have to look at our network with a fresh eye and make sure that it is a facility that will serve the most amount of users, the all ages and ability users. Then we would like to include pedestrian safety recommendations. So the current plan already says sidewalks should be on both sides of the road all over Fairfax County. So there is not necessarily a full-fledged pedestrian plan that maps out the entire sidewalk network. So this is handled on the policy level. However, intersections and crossings are an issue that need to be addressed with some specific policy guidance. We can also look at sidewalk width. Is 5 feet really what we want, or do we want a better, higher standard? How many crosswalks do we want on each leg of the intersection? How are mid-block crosswalks treated? Of course, the roads belong to Vdot, and we need to do that in coordination with Vdot, but look at some of the best practices and see what we can include in this plan to enhance the pedestrian experience and safety. The project is currently broken into 2 phases. We're currently in phase 1. At the end of phase 1, we started last July and are wrapping up phase 1 in this summer, probably also in July. And the first phase really focused on laying the groundwork for updating the network and the policy recommendations. So we did a lot of existing condition review, both on what are the existing facilities, but also what are the demographics and land uses, where are the big pedestrian and attractors and generators, equity needs, health concerns, parks. We looked at all these different kind of aspects that are important for the development of an active transportation network. We looked at the current policies and plans, both on the local and state level, to inform this effort. And the outcome of phase 1 is a vision, goals, and objective statement that will go to the Board of Supervisors for approval, which will form the baseline for develop the recommendation updating the network in phase 2. We're working also on a strategic safety program plan, which is somewhat of a standalone task. So that's something we would finish at the end of phase 1, which is not a comprehensive plan update, but an internal work plan for Fairfax County to work towards a Vision Zero type program. We call it strategic safety, since we don't have that Vision Zero branding ability to use that yet. So until we can use it, we say strategic safety, systematic safety. I'm sorry, to prevent road deaths before they happen, not react to them as we have done in the past. To look where are the crash clusters and how can we enhance safety at the spot, but taking a step back and looking at our design guidelines, working with Vdot on how can we make our road network safer for all users and prevent fatalities in the future. Then in phase 2, as I mentioned, this is where we get into the developing recommendations, both for the network, but also for the active transportation program that Fairfax County has. Everything from outreach events, encouragement events to get more people riding or walking, and educate drivers about laws, things you already brought up, as well as implementation guidance and also funding prioritization. So that one is really key because the funding need for active transportation improvements is so large in Fairfax County, around $10 billion. And we don't have that type of money available to us, so we have to prioritize where do we want to focus the dollars that we have, and we are looking at both where is the highest usage, where's the biggest demand for active transportation facilities, as well as equity needs, like where are the parts of the population that really rely on active transportation facilities and are also mostly affected by fatalities and crashes when they're out and about using transit or fulfilling daily needs. So the analysis we are doing in phase 2 will help us inform funding prioritization, which is of course a recommendation that the Board of Supervisors has to approve as well. So now you're welcome to share your thoughts on your vision for active travel in Fairfax County in the future. So please raise your hand if you would like to speak on that issue. Or feel free to use the chat, but it seems like we're mostly having questions by voice.
We'll start with Tom.
Hi. I guess one of the challenges I see is that you talked about establishing, where's the demand to put these facilities, and just about every traffic light we have in the county, is used to establish, demand for auto, right? I mean, we can count cars. We can use those induction loops at all the intersections to count cars. We have sort of Vdot has objectives around and ways to measure every single street to make sure it's efficient for autos and auto travel is efficient. How do we do the same thing for biking and walking? Is there a way for us to, do we have any objectives? Does Vdot have objectives around biking and walking throughput, around how many people use the roads outside of auto users, and how do we measure those users and figure out where the demand is and where to spend the money?
Great question, thank you. So we have two specific approaches. So first we looked at the land use. So based on where the density of attractors, like the commercial areas, parks, schools. So some uses in the county we know will attract active transportation or any trips for that matter. So we looked at that on the one hand, but then we also looked at residential density where more people live. We would expect more people to be out and about as well. So the lower density areas probably have fewer pedestrians and cyclists out. There's of course the exception of the regional trails and also very popular rural areas that are used for recreational cycling. So Strava data is interesting to look at for kind of those areas. As we know, it's primarily used by recreational cyclists. But then we have big data that we can use and then have analyzed to determine where are people actually going right now. So we look at pedestrian data. It's cell phone data that pings every 5 seconds. So based on the speed of the ping and the movement, the data provider can tell if it's a pedestrian, a cyclist, or someone in a vehicle. And it's not perfect, but it's the best data that we had so far to analyze. And it's really interesting to see where those pockets of activities are. And many are not surprising. Like our activity centers, of course, have most of the activity. But then there are other areas where pedestrians are out and about, and they're often smaller shopping centers, people working in the center. So we overlaid the walking to work and biking to work census data with the actual pedestrian volume data, and there was some overlap. So people working in a shopping center, for example, not just attracting the customers, but people living close by, and then that immediately raises an equity flag too, considering the type of jobs that they're walking, that those are the areas where there's the highest need. So we've done that type of analysis. In the future, we hope to have more automated counters out that are necessary to cross-reference the big data and what we do actually see on the ground, because the big data is still, not everyone has a cell phone. There are gaps in the data. And for example, in a shopping mall, it sometimes picks up those trips, people walking inside a building. If you go to Tyson's shopping mall, you can walk easily a mile inside the building. So it does take some data cleaning and some cross-referencing with actual accounts to make sure that the data is correct. But it helps to compare within the data on the map, like where are the higher activities to where we see lower activities.
Thanks.
All right, Sonia has her hand up.
All right. So, my vision for active travel, I think, the county, this plan, and I think the county and the supervisors are very supportive of, really embracing active modes as a way to move around our county and trying to shift that emphasis as best we can away from always having to drive to let's walk, bike, access, safely access public transit. This is going to be something that we need to engage more robustly as we try to solve our climate crisis and reduce our transportation emissions. So I think that, we're on the right track with the vision that you are laying out in this plan. I think my one concern here is how this plan interacts with Vdot. And I guess I was going to ask, are you coordinating with Vdot as you lay out this plan? I know part of it was also sort of looking at policies and laws that might need changing so that we can embrace some of these more innovative facilities and different tactics that we want to use to really improve active transportation. And so have you looked at what those policies and law changes are needed? Can you share them with the advocates so that we can work better together to support, furthering a more robust active transportation system in Fairfax? And how are we going to get Vdot to sort of work better with us? I'm so grateful Fairfax County is doing what they're doing, but we always seem to sort of come up against this wall when it comes to implementation. So that's it.
Good, thank you, Sonia. Yeah, so we are coordinating with Vdot. At this stage, it's not as much needed because we're doing a lot of the groundwork, just data analysis and public outreach, We did look at the Vdot design guidelines and the Code of Virginia. We haven't done the full analysis yet. That's part of phase 2. And yes, it would be public information, the type of, policies that would recommended to be addressed. So obviously we are not owning our roads, so we do rely on Vdot, but we can provide recommendations to them. I know they're sensitive to what's in our comprehensive plan. So the first step is to put it in the comprehensive plan, and that helps with the coordination and giving it some teeth. It doesn't mean it will always get implemented, but at least you can say it's in our comprehensive plan, and that's what we would like to see in our own county. The Code of Virginia, those changes are a lot more challenging, or are a challenge on their own, but the process is not that straightforward. So we do have a legislative agenda that we work on every year. We have a staff person that travels to Richmond and works with the legislators there on some of the Fairfax County priorities and provides input and feedback. So having a list of these issues, and thank you to Fab for providing some ideas as well, is something we can work towards. And it doesn't mean we achieve them, the first year, but having them all laid out and then prioritized will help us also internally kind of work towards those goals. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. No, I know it's going to be, it's a long road and we're just at the start of it here, but I was just sort of putting it out there, recognizing that's often a hurdle we face, but we're here to support.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's really more of a, we have more of a challenge than other jurisdictions. So we often get asked, why can't you do this that Arlington does or DC? I was like, yeah, because we don't own our roads. So we do rely on Vdot to approve all of our infrastructure desires, unless it's in a park, of course, but then we need to work with the park authority. So that's another entity entirely that has their own master planning process. So that requires close coordination. We also need to coordinate with Nova Parks as well as the National Park Service. So Vdot is not our only stakeholder. Then we have the school board owns land. So there are all these different landholders that have full jurisdictions over their own land. So it will require a lot of coordination to get this plan right and hopefully implement it in the future. If there are no further questions.
I don't see anything.
Okay, then let's look at other ways to get involved. So thank you again for sharing so many of your ideas and thoughts on active transportation issues. So please fill out the community survey as well if you haven't done so. It takes about 14 minutes on average, depending on how much information you're interested in entering. But it's a really great survey. We have over 1,000 responses at this point, but we're hoping to get more. So please spread the word. It's available in 8 languages, so we're trying to make it inclusive. We do have a paper version of it, a much shorter 10-question paper version of it that we're currently passing out at food distribution sites. So if you want a few to pass out, if you know of any place that may be interested, please let us know. But the digital survey is quite easy to use and easier to analyze. So that's one of the main ways to provide input to the plan. Then we also have 2 maps on the website. And the first map is a point map where you can zoom into your neighborhood or your area of interest, place a point of where the issue is on the map, and then a box pops up that you can enter an explanation of what the issue is, and even upload pictures. And that's really helpful information, not just for this plan, but also for future rounds of funding. So this is pretty much a list of unfunded issues in a geographic format, which is going to be so useful for the Department of Transportation to work towards fixing those issues in the future. So please take a look at that and share your insights there. And then we have a map that's forward-looking. So it's a visionary map. It has the current bicycle master plan network on it, as well as the countywide trails plan network. So it overlays them. So it's interesting to see in two different colors. I think orange is the bike plan and purple is a trails plan. And then you can add your own new trails or bikeways to it that are not currently part of the network, not in the plan network. So if there's, for example, a neighborhood connection missing, or a connection to a school missing, or a connection to a park, please take a look, and you can just draw in, just zoom into the map, and you can draw your line in. You can choose between a hiking trail and a paved trail or bikeway, or you can also highlight streets that you would like to see complete streets improvements on. So again, you can type in your comment, upload pictures if you like. And then the next step is to wrap up public engagement on May 15th. So all these, the survey and the maps are available to the public until May 15th. And then we will take that information and develop a vision and goals reflecting the key outcomes for active transportation for Fairfax County. And that document will be available for public review and comment probably at the end of May, early June, before it will go to the Board of Supervisors for approval in late June or early July. And that will conclude the phase 1 of this project. So this ends the formal part of this meeting. So if you would like to stick around for a few minutes to ask any other questions or share any other thoughts you may have, you can do so. You can also email us at ActiveFairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov, or send us a letter at Fairfax County Department of Transportation, Attention Active Transportation Program at 4050 Legato Road. Let's see if we still have any other questions or comments.
Not right away. We'll give it a couple seconds. I apologize for the noise on this end.
Like, it doesn't look like anyone has any comments. So thank you again for sharing so many of your thoughts and insights and feedback. There was a really great conversation. It's just the three of you, but between even 3 people, we can have really great information sharing. So there were a couple of points that have not come on any of the other meetings. So this was really, really helpful. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us today. And yeah, please take the survey, look at the maps if you haven't so already, and spread the word. Again, the deadline is May 15th. And that concludes the meeting for today. Thank you so much.